My name is Margaret Reed, and for 62 years, I thought I understood what family meant. Quiet mornings, coffee at sunrise, and the comforting chaos of people you love. I live in a small, sunlit town in Oregon, the kind where the mailman still waves, and everyone knows who planted what in their garden. My son Ethan was my whole world after his father passed. I raised him on my own in the little blue house with the white porch, 2 streets from the elementary school he once rode his bike to. He was the kind of boy who built forts in the living room and left Legos in every corner, always gentle, always thoughtful, the kind of son who'd still call his mother every Sunday, until he didn't. I still remember the day silence replaced his laughter. The house had never felt so still. Ethan met Sophie 5 years ago in Portland. She was quiet, graceful in a way that made you straighten your posture when she entered the room. Her laugh was soft, her manners polite, and when she first shook my hand, I thought, this girl is going to take care of my boy. Their wedding was small, backyard lights, a homemade cake, Ethan in a suit that didn't quite fit right. I remember thinking how young they looked, how full of promise. When Sophie got pregnant a year later, my heart felt like it had been given a second life. I'd always dreamed of being a grandmother, of holding a tiny hand, of hearing Nana echo down my hallway. I even cleared out the spare room, painted it pale yellow, bought a rocking chair from a thrift shop. Every night before bed, I'd sit there for a few minutes, imagining the baby sleeping in my arms. But things changed faster than I could understand. When baby Liam was born, I wasn't even there. Ethan said the hospital had limited visitors because of flu restrictions, but something in his voice didn't sit right. Still, I didn't question it. I just waited. I sent flowers, little blue blankets, a silver rattle engraved with his initials. Days passed, then weeks. When they finally came home, I drove to their house with a basket full of baby clothes. Sophie opened the door just enough to stand in the frame. Her eyes were tired, ringed with shadows, the look of someone who hadn't slept in days. Sophie, I smiled, I brought something for little Liam. She hesitated. I thought maybe she was just exhausted. New mothers often are. But then she said something I'll never forget, her voice trembling, her hands clutching the doorknob like it was the only thing holding her up. Please don't come near the baby. At first I thought I'd misheard. Maybe she was joking. Maybe postpartum nerves were talking. But she didn't smile. She didn't move. She just stood there, her chest rising like she was holding back tears. Sweetheart, I said softly, I'm her grandmother. I just want to see him. Her voice cracked. It's not what you think. Then she closed the door. I stood there on the porch, holding the basket, the evening wind brushing past me. The smell of rain lingered in the air. Somewhere down the street, a dog barked, and it struck me how suddenly a neighborhood can feel unfamiliar when love turns cold. That night, I sat in my living room, the basket still on the passenger seat of my car. I watched the streetlight flicker outside and replayed every word. It's not what you think. What could that possibly mean? I tried to call Ethan, no answer. Texted, no reply. The silence stretched into something heavier, something that pressed against my chest. The next morning, I left a note in their mailbox. I love you both. I'll be here when you're ready. A week later, it rained nonstop. I watched from my kitchen window as puddles gathered under the oak tree, wondering if they were okay, wondering if maybe Sophie was struggling with something deeper, maybe postpartum depression. But then I remembered the way she looked at me, like she was afraid, not sad. And fear doesn't come from exhaustion. It comes from secrets. That thought kept me awake. I'd pour myself tea at 2 a.m., stare at the empty rocking chair in the yellow room, and imagine what could make a woman so terrified of a grandmother's love. I started noticing little things. Ethan's car wasn't parked outside their house as often, their curtains stayed drawn all day, and once when I drove by, I saw a shadow move near the window. Small, but quick. Was it Liam? I told myself not to imagine things. Families have rough patches. New mothers need space. But deep down, something in me knew there was distance now, not just in miles, but in truth. A few days later, I left another gift, a tiny hand-knit blanket I'd been making for months. Sophie didn't open the door, but that evening when I walked past again, the blanket was gone from the porch. So she had taken it. Maybe that meant something. Maybe a small sign of hope. That night, I dreamed of Ethan as a child, running into my arms after scraping his knee, crying that he was scared.
I used to tell him, there's nothing in this world you can't tell your mother. But now it felt like he'd forgotten that promise. Weeks went by. The house grew quieter. Even the birds outside seemed to visit less. I found myself talking to the framed photo of Ethan and his father on the mantel, asking questions no one could answer. And then one quiet afternoon, just as I was trimming the roses in my yard, my phone buzzed. It was Ethan. My heart leapt. He didn't say much, just that they were doing fine and needed some time. "Can I at least see my grandson?" I asked, my voice barely steady. There was a long pause on the line. Then he said softly, "Mom, not right now." Before I could respond, the call ended. I stood there in my garden, phone still in my hand, the scent of cut roses thick in the air. For the first time since his father's death, I felt like I'd truly lost my son. But that last thing Sophie said before closing the door, it played in my head again and again. It's not what you think. Not anger, not rejection, just fear. And that's when I decided I wasn't going to stay away anymore. Whatever she was hiding, whatever had turned my family into strangers, I needed to find out. That night, as I locked the front door, I caught my reflection in the hallway mirror, tired eyes, trembling hands, and for the first time I whispered to myself, what if the baby she's protecting isn't even hers?
Some distances don't come from miles. They come from silence. And lately, silence had become Margaret's closest companion. Ethan had stopped returning her calls. Sophie barely spoke when she came over. And the baby, sweet little Oliver, was the only one who smiled without hesitation. Margaret tried to tell herself it was normal. New parents needed space, new routines, new priorities. But deep down, something didn't feel right. Every time she offered to help, Sophie's eyes shifted, not with guilt, but with something else. A quiet, cautious fear. For 3 days, Ethan didn't return Margaret's calls. Not once. She left simple messages, just checking in, "Do you need groceries?" But they hung in the air unanswered. When she finally drove by their house, the curtains were drawn. No lights in the nursery, only a faint lullaby playing inside. The same one that had echoed through the hospital weeks ago. Margaret stood at the gate, her fingers gripping the cold iron bars. Something about that song made her skin crawl. At the small corner store, Margaret overheard 2 neighbors whispering. "Poor Sophie," they said. "Postpartum, not herself at all. I saw her at the park. She wouldn't even let anyone touch the baby," another added. Margaret's heart tightened. Postpartum? Maybe, but she'd seen that look in Sophie's eyes before. Not sadness, protection. Still, Margaret forced a smile, bought her milk, and walked away. But as she reached her car, she caught sight of the same 2 women staring after her, whispering again. Only this time, she was sure she heard her own name. That night, as she sat by the fireplace, Margaret couldn't shake the image of the hospital. She remembered Sophie lying pale and quiet after the delivery, clutching the blanket tightly around the baby. She remembered the nurse, young, red-haired, hands trembling slightly, as she handed the infant to Margaret. "Congratulations, Grandma," she said softly. But her eyes looked nervous. At the time, she thought it was just exhaustion. Now it felt like something more, something she had missed. The next morning, Margaret opened an old leather notebook, the one she used to write grocery lists. She drew a line at the top and wrote, "Things I've noticed." Under it, Ethan distant, avoiding calls, Sophie fearful, possessive of baby. Nurse's strange behavior, lullaby always the same tune. Hospital bracelet had different font than mine. She hesitated, then added one last line. Something's not adding up. As she closed the book, she caught her reflection in the mirror. Her eyes looked older, yes, but sharper too. A mother's eyes never truly rest, especially when her instincts are whispering louder than logic. Margaret decided to visit. No calls, no warnings, just an unexpected drop-in. Sophie opened the door halfway, surprise flashing across her face. "Oh, Margaret, you didn't call." "I thought I'd bring soup," Margaret smiled. "It's been cold lately." Inside, the air felt thick. The curtains were drawn again. Oliver was asleep in his crib, but there was no sound. No soft breathing, no movement. Margaret leaned closer. Then Sophie stepped between them. "He just fell asleep," she said quickly. "He needs rest." Margaret nodded, backing away slowly. Her eyes caught a piece of paper on the coffee table. A hospital bill. It bore the same date as Oliver's birth. But the hospital name wasn't the one Sophie had told her. That night, rain still tapping against her window, Margaret sat alone at her kitchen table. She reread her journal, tracing each word with her trembling hand. Then, a soft thud. Something had slid under her front door. An envelope. No address, no name, just a single word written in black ink. "Look closer." Her breath caught as she tore it open. Inside lay a small plastic wristband. White, smudged with faint blue print. She held it under the lamp. It read, "Baby boy, 0418, Ward C." Her grandson's birthday was 4/21. Margaret's hands shook. She whispered, "No, this can't be right." Margaret sat frozen. Every sound in the house felt amplified. The creak of the chair, the hum of the refrigerator, the ticking of the clock. Her mind raced. Who left that envelope? Why her? And why did the dates not match? She rushed to the drawer where she had kept the hospital photos. In one picture, Sophie lay smiling faintly, baby in arms, but something else caught her attention. In the corner of the image, just barely visible, the same red-haired nurse, looking straight into the camera. Expression blank, almost like she knew she was being watched. Margaret pressed the wristband against her chest. She whispered a prayer. Was it possible that the baby in Sophie's arms wasn't hers? The thought was unthinkable, unforgivable. But as she stared at the tiny white band, the one that didn't match her grandson's birth, a mother's instinct hardened into something colder. Determination. She opened her notebook again and wrote 3 new words at the bottom of the page. Find the truth.
Margaret didn't notice the figure standing across the street, watching her window. Sleep didn't visit Margaret that night. Only questions did. They sat by her, whispering what-ifs into the dark, and by dawn, those whispers had turned into resolve. Margaret Reed had been many things: a teacher, a wife, a mother. But beneath them all, she was something else entirely. A woman who never ignored her instincts. And this time, her instincts were screaming. Margaret stood by the window, watching the early light crawl across the garden. The wristbands still lay on the table, next to her notebook. Her thoughts circled the same pattern. 2 babies, 1 bracelet, wrong date. It didn't make sense, unless something had gone terribly wrong. She poured herself a cup of tea, though her hands trembled so much the cup rattled against the saucer. She whispered to herself, "If I go asking questions, they'll think I'm losing it." Then she looked down at the notebook. The words she'd written last night seemed to stare back. Find the truth. She exhaled. Decision made. By noon, Margaret had packed a few boxes labeled charity donations. Inside were old blankets, tiny knitted caps, and baby clothes she'd saved from Ethan's childhood. Her plan was simple. She'd visit the hospital pretending to deliver supplies for the maternity ward, and while there, she'd look.
The automatic doors slid open with a hiss. Margaret's heart skipped. It smelled the same: antiseptic, faint coffee, and that sterile stillness hospitals always carry. A place where life begins, and secrets are buried. She smiled politely at the receptionist. "Good morning, dear. I've brought some donations for the maternity wing." The young woman, barely out of her 20s, smiled and buzzed her through without much fuss. Margaret's shoes clicked softly on the tiled floor as she followed the familiar hallway. Past the nursery window, past the nurse's station, past the place where she'd once held her grandson for the first time.
For a moment, she almost turned back. Almost. But then she saw something. A nameplate on a door. Records Department, authorized personnel only. And the air seemed to thicken.
The room was colder than she expected. Rows upon rows of files, manila folders stacked neatly in gray cabinets, each labeled by date, each holding stories that most people would never know. Margaret closed the door behind her, clutching her tote bag tightly. She scanned the shelves. April 21st. Her finger traced the labels until it stopped. April 18, April 19, April 20, but when she reached April 21, she froze. 2 newborn files, both labeled male infant. Born the same morning, different mothers. One name she recognized, Sophie Reed. The other, Laura Whitmore. A small chill crept up her spine. She reached for Sophie's file, but the tab wouldn't move. A red stamp across the front read, "Confidential, sealed by order of admin." Her throat went dry. Why would a newborn's file be sealed?
Margaret quickly shut the cabinet and turned. A nurse stood at the doorway, mid-40s, tired eyes, name badge tilted sideways. "Can I help you, ma'am?" Margaret forced a smile. "Oh, I was just looking for the maternity supervisor. I brought donations." The nurse's gaze shifted briefly to the cabinet behind her, then back to Margaret's face. She hesitated, then stepped closer, voice dropping. "Mrs. Reed, isn't it?" Margaret blinked. You know me?" "Everyone here remembers you and your daughter-in-law." There was something strange in the woman's tone. Not kindness, not accusation, just warning. "Whatever you're looking for, leave it alone. Some things are best buried." Margaret stared, heart pounding. "Why? What happened?" The nurse looked around, as if cameras might be watching. "You ask too many questions, and you end up on the wrong side of a locked door." Then she turned and walked away, briskly, heels echoing down the hall. Margaret's hands shook as she opened the other file, the one marked Laura Whitmore. Inside, a birth record. Male infant, weight 6 pounds 12 ounces, born 04/18, 3:42 a.m. But what caught her attention wasn't the name, it was the note scribbled in red ink on the bottom. Transferred to alternate nursery due to ID tag mismatch. Case resolved by Nurse H. Collins. Nurse H. Collins? The red-haired nurse. Her breath caught. There it was, the first real connection between the 2 births. But before she could read further, the door creaked again. "Mrs. Reed." This time, it was a man's voice, deep, calm, too calm. She turned to see a hospital administrator, clipboard in hand. "You're not authorized to be here. Please hand me that file." Margaret hesitated. "I was only..." "Now, Mrs. Reed." She reluctantly placed it back. "We appreciate your donations," he said, tone polite but cold. "Next time, please coordinate with staff." He smiled, but his eyes didn't. As he escorted her out, Margaret could feel the weight of invisible eyes tracking her every step.
Margaret exhaled as the hospital doors slid shut behind her. The air outside felt heavier now, humid, electric. She reached her car, fumbling for her keys. Then, a flash of light. She turned sharply. A nurse in pale blue scrubs stood by the edge of the lot, pretending to check her phone, but Margaret had seen it. The phone raised, the lens aimed at her license plate. Their eyes met for a split second before the nurse turned away and vanished through a side door. Margaret stood frozen in the rain. Her heartbeat matched the thunder above. Someone was watching her. Someone wanted her to stop.
The road blurred under the storm. Margaret gripped the steering wheel, mind racing. Every instinct told her to go home, lock the doors, and forget all of it. But another part, the stronger part, knew that forgetting would cost her something far greater. She replayed everything in her head. The sealed file, the nurse's warning, the wrong date on the wristband, and one thought refused to fade. If Sophie's file was sealed, what were they hiding? At home, Margaret spread the few notes she had across the table. Each clue felt like a fragment of something bigger, a puzzle, deliberately scattered to keep her blind. She took out her phone and typed, Lara Whitmore, hospital, April births. Nothing. No record. No social media. Then, as she was about to close her laptop, a small ad popped up on the sidebar. New maternity nurse joins City Hospital. Helen Collins. Photo. Red hair, kind smile. Her pulse spiked. Nurse H. Collins. The article was dated 3 weeks before Oliver's birth. She printed it and pinned it beside the wristband on her corkboard. Then she sat back, rubbing her temples. Outside, a car slowed near her house. Headlights flashed through her curtains, lingered, then drove off. Margaret rose slowly, heart pounding again. She walked to the window. The street was empty. Only the reflection of her own fearful eyes stared back.
Silence, then a faint knock at the door. Margaret froze. 3 knocks. Soft, deliberate. She waited. No voice. Cautiously, she opened the door. No one outside. Just a small paper envelope sitting on the doormat, damp from the rain. She picked it up, hands trembling. Inside, a single photo. It was her, standing in the hospital records room that afternoon, and written across the back, in hurried ink, "Stop digging, or you'll lose more than answers." Her breath caught. Her fingers went cold. She looked up at the street again, and for a brief second, lightning illuminated a car parked across the road, engine running. Heartbeat sound returns. One long, low note builds to silence. Margaret shut the door, locked it, and pressed her back against the wood. She knew now, this wasn't just a mistake. It was something buried, something protected, and she just stepped into it. The confrontation. The next morning came heavy with silence. Margaret hadn't slept. The photograph from the envelope still sat on her kitchen table, next to the wristband in the article about Nurse Collins. Rainwater had dried into faint smudges, leaving the image of her in the hospital looking ghostly, almost unreal. She'd spent the night staring at the window, replaying the same question again and again. Why would someone threaten her for asking about her grandson? And if there was nothing to hide, why was Sophie so afraid? Margaret folded the photo, tucked it into a drawer, and whispered to herself, "It's time to stop being afraid." She grabbed her coat. Today, she wasn't going to ask questions through doors or leave notes in mailboxes. She was going to face them, her son, her daughter-in-law, and demand the truth.
The drive to Ethan's house felt longer than it should have. Every turn carried memories. The old playground he used to run through, the bakery where they'd buy birthday cakes, the street where he'd learned to ride his bike. All of it suddenly distant, like photographs fading under sunlight. When she reached their home, the lawn looked unkept. Grass overgrown, curtains closed. Her hand trembled as she knocked on the door. It opened halfway. Ethan stood there, hair disheveled, eyes red, like he hadn't slept either. "Mom, what are you doing here?" Margaret's throat tightened. "I need to talk to you, Ethan. About Sophie. About Liam." He sighed, glancing behind him as if making sure Sophie wasn't within earshot. "This isn't a good time." "You've been saying that for months," she said softly. "But time isn't what's broken here. Honesty is." His jaw clenched. "Mom, please." "I went to the hospital," she interrupted. His face paled. "What?" I had to. Something isn't right. Sophie's file was sealed, Ethan. The nurse warned me to stop digging. Someone even followed me home. He stepped out, shutting the door behind him. His voice dropped. Mom, you can't just show up there and start what? Caring about my family? I'm your mother, Ethan. I have every right to know what's happening. For a long moment, neither spoke. Rain began to fall, soft and steady between them. Then Ethan whispered, almost pleading, "You're ruining everything." Margaret froze at those words. Ruining everything? She repeated quietly. Ethan rubbed his face, exhaling hard. Mom, Sophie's been through a lot. She's fragile. You digging around, it's making things worse. Fragile? Margaret's voice trembled. Ethan, she wouldn't even let me hold my grandson. That's not fragile. That's fear. He looked away. You don't understand. Then help me understand. Ethan's shoulders sagged. She doesn't want to talk about the hospital. There was an issue. A mix-up, but it's resolved. A mix-up? Margaret's heart pounded. He hesitated. It's not my story to tell. Then whose is it, Ethan? She pressed. Because it sure as hell affects you. He stared at her, a look between guilt and exhaustion. Mom, please, let it go. She wanted to scream. Instead, she whispered, I raised you to face truth, not hide from it. For the first time, she saw something flicker in his expression, shame. But before he could reply, the door opened behind him. Sophie stood there, holding Liam.
Sophie looked pale, her eyes swollen, hair pulled into a loose bun. When she saw Margaret, she froze. Margaret's heart softened despite everything. Sophie, she whispered, I just want to see him. Sophie shook her head. You shouldn't be here. Ethan turned, voice low. Soph, it's okay. No, she said sharply, clutching the baby tighter. It's not. Margaret stepped closer. I'm not here to fight. I just want to understand why you won't let me near my grandson. Tears welled in Sophie's eyes. You don't understand. Just stay away. The words hit Margaret like glass. Her voice cracked. Sophie, please. Sophie took a step back, whispering again, softer this time, broken. You don't know what you're asking for. Then she turned and disappeared inside, the door closing slowly between them. Margaret stood motionless on the porch. Ethan lingered for a second longer before saying, Mom, go home. When the door clicked shut, Margaret felt something inside her crumble. The storm she'd been holding back finally broke, not in anger, but in grief.
Suspicions. Back home, Margaret sat on the couch, drenched in rain and silence. Her mind spiraled through possibilities, each darker than the last. What if Sophie had cheated? What if Liam wasn't Ethan's child? Was that why the file was sealed? Why Sophie was terrified? She stared at the wristband again. The date mismatch suddenly felt heavier. She whispered to the empty room, if he's not Ethan's, who does he belong to? It wasn't jealousy or anger that fueled her anymore. It was love, the fierce, aching kind only a mother knows. She needed the truth not to punish, but to protect. She took Liam's small blanket from her bag, the one she'd knitted months ago, now faintly smelling of baby powder and Sophie's perfume. And then she saw it. A single strand of fine golden hair clinging to the fabric. Margaret's hands steadied. Her decision was made.
Margaret searched online for a discreet DNA testing service. Her fingers moved fast, determination replacing fear. She ordered a kit overnight, one that required nothing more than a small hair sample. When the package arrived, she sealed the strand carefully, her heart pounding as she filled in the form. Father, Ethan Reed. Grandmother, Margaret Reed. Child, Liam Reed. She paused before sealing it. If she was wrong, she'd be breaking her son's trust for nothing. If she was right, she'd be tearing open something far worse. She whispered a quiet prayer before dropping the envelope into the mailbox. As it fell inside, she exhaled shakily. 3 days.
That's how long it would take for the results. 3 days that felt like walking through fog with a knife pressed to her chest. The first day passed in silence. Ethan didn't call, Sophie didn't text. Margaret barely ate, just sat by the window, journal in lap, scribbling every memory she could recall from the hospital visit years ago. On the second day, a neighbor stopped by to ask how she was. She smiled politely, lied through her teeth, and said she was fine. But inside, the fear grew roots. By the third morning, she couldn't sit still. She walked through the park where she used to take Ethan as a boy. She imagined him chasing ducks, laughing, his small hand gripping hers. That hand, once so tiny, was now the one she was afraid she might lose forever. By afternoon, her email pinged. The subject line made her heart stop. DNA results, confidential. But before she could open it, her phone rang. It was Ethan.
Mom! Ethan's voice was cracked, frantic. Is Sophie with you? Margaret stood up. What? No, why? She's gone. The world seemed to tilt. Gone? What do you mean gone? She left a note, he said, his voice trembling. She took Liam. I came home from work and they were just gone. Margaret's heart raced. Did she say where she was going? He swallowed hard. Just that she needed time, and that she was sorry. Margaret's knees went weak. She gripped the edge of the table. Ethan, listen to me. We'll find her. But inside, a colder thought whispered, was she running from Ethan or from me? She looked toward her laptop, the unopened email still glowing faintly on the screen. That night, Margaret drove to Ethan's house. He was sitting on the living room floor, surrounded by baby toys, his face buried in his hands. The note lay on the coffee table, crumpled and tear-stained. I don't understand, he muttered. She said she loved me. She said everything was fine. Margaret knelt beside him, placing a hand on his shoulder. Maybe she's scared. Maybe something happened that she couldn't say. Ethan looked up at her, eyes hollow. Scared of what? Margaret hesitated. She couldn't tell him about the DNA test. Not yet. Instead, she whispered, We'll get them back. I promise. He nodded weakly, but his eyes were empty, the kind of emptiness that comes when love turns into loss before you even understand why. Margaret stayed with him that night, watching as he drifted into a restless sleep on the couch. And as the house grew quiet, she turned toward the laptop again, the screen now dark, waiting. She hovered over the touchpad, heart trembling. Her fingers brushed the mouse, but before she could open the results, the door creaked. Ethan stirred. Mom? She quickly closed the laptop. Nothing, sweetheart. Go back to sleep. He did. And Margaret sat in the dark, clutching her chest as the question clawed inside her. Was Sophie running from guilt? Or from the truth she was about to uncover?
Morning light crept through the curtains. Margaret sat by the table, the laptop in front of her, unopened emails still unread. Her coffee had gone cold hours ago. The house felt impossibly still. Then, a faint knock at the door. For a heartbeat, she thought it might be Sophie. She rushed to open it, but there was no one there. Just a small package on the porch. No return address. Her hand shook as she picked it up. Inside, a single folded baby photo. Liam. But on the back, written in black ink, were 3 words that sent her world spinning. He's not yours.
The hidden truth. Margaret stands by the glass window, her hands trembling. Inside, Dr. Harper reviews the DNA test results, his expression unreadable. Margaret, just tell me, doctor. I need the truth. No more guesses. Dr. Harper, I triple-checked the markers. There's no maternal link to Sophie Reed. This child belongs to someone else. Margaret, what do you mean, not Sophie's? She carried him. I saw her. Dr. Harper, I triple-checked the markers. There's no maternal link to Sophie Reed. This child belongs to someone else. Margaret grips the counter. Her wedding ring clinks softly on the metal. Margaret. Oh, Sophie, what did you do?
Interior, Margaret's living room. Late night. A clock ticking. rain tapping against the window. Ethan is asleep upstairs, unaware. Margaret sits in the dim light, the DNA report spread across the coffee table. A baby monitor hums faintly beside her, Liam's soft breathing audible. Margaret closes her eyes, whispering a prayer, half anger, half grief.
Margaret. For weeks, I wanted truth. Now that I held it, I wanted it to disappear. She hears a faint creak. The door opens. Sophie stands there, drenched, pale, eyes swollen from crying. Margaret, Voice cracks. I know. Margaret's head lifts sharply. The silence between them is unbearable. You knew? Sophie nods, tears spilling down her cheeks. I found out 3 weeks ago. I took another test, quietly. I didn't want to believe it. I thought maybe they were wrong. 3 weeks. Steps forward. You knew this all this time. While I? Sophie pleading. I was scared, Margaret. He's my whole world, Margaret. I couldn't let them take him away from me. Margaret's anger trembles beneath sorrow. You let us live in a lie. It wasn't a lie. It was love. I fed him. I sang to him every night. Doesn't that count for anything? Margaret's eyes soften for a heartbeat. Then steel returns. Love doesn't erase blood, Sophie. You stole someone's child. Sophie drops to her knees, clutching the baby monitor, her voice breaking. No, I didn't steal him. I just couldn't lose him. Silence. The ticking clock echoes like thunder. Interior, motel room, next morning. Margaret drives through mist, following an address from Sophie's car tracker. The motel stands lonely by the highway, neon sign flickering, vacancy.
I didn't sleep. I didn't think. I just drove. Every mile felt heavier than the last, not because of distance, but because of what waited at the end of it. Margaret knocks on the door. No response. She pushes it open slightly. Inside, Sophie sits on the floor, back against the bed, rocking Liam in her arms. The baby coos, oblivious to the storm around him. Margaret's expression softens, maternal instinct overtaking judgment. Sophie. Sophie looks up, red-eyed, voice trembling like glass. He's all I have, Margaret. When I found out, when that report came in, I wanted to tell Ethan. I did. But every time I looked at him, I saw what losing this baby would do to him. He'd break. And you thought lying would save him? I thought it would save us. Margaret walks closer, sits beside her on the floor. They both look at Liam. I've spent my whole life believing truth heals, but maybe sometimes it just shatters differently. They sit in silence, only the baby's breathing filling the space. Sophie, listen to me. We can fix this, but not by hiding. We need to tell Ethan together. It's not that simple. Why not? Sophie's hands shake. She reaches into a drawer beside her and pulls out another envelope, sealed, slightly crumpled. Because this isn't the only report. Margaret frowns, slowly takes it. She opens it, her eyes dart across the page, and her breath catches. No, this can't be right. It is. The baby's real mother was Lena. Margaret freezes. Confusion floods her face. Lena, Ethan's ex? But she died 2 years ago. Yes, in that car crash. But before that, she gave birth. The hospital covered it up, said the baby didn't survive. Oh, dear God. I found her name on the second test. It matched the old record, her DNA markers. That's when I realized this baby wasn't switched randomly. It was deliberate. Margaret stands, trembling. Her shadow falls across the crib. The room felt smaller suddenly. Every breath tasted of betrayal. The walls themselves seemed to whisper secrets, too heavy to hold. All this time, we were chasing lies built on graves. Margaret, please, don't tell Ethan yet. Let me find the right way. He can't know like this. If Lena was the mother, if the hospital hid it, then someone knew. Someone planned it. And they're still out there? Margaret's phone buzzes. Unknown number. She answers. Silence. Then a distorted voice. Cold. Deliberate. Mrs. Reed, stop digging. That baby was never supposed to survive. Static. Call ends. Margaret's face drains of color. What did you just say? Silence. Sophie stares, terrified. Margaret lowers the phone, her heartbeat echoing in the soundscape. The truth I begged for finally came, and with it, a warning I could never forget. Camera pans slowly toward the baby sleeping in Sophie's arms, peaceful, unaware. Margaret's eyes fill with dread. Soft, haunting piano begins to play. I thought the storm had passed, but I was wrong. The real tempest was just beginning. The room felt smaller suddenly. Every breath tasted of betrayal. The walls themselves seemed to whisper secrets, too heavy to hold. All this time, we were chasing lies built on graves. Margaret, please, don't tell Ethan yet. Let me find the right way. He can't know like this. If Lena was the mother, if the hospital hid it, then someone knew. Someone planned it. And they're still out there? Margaret's phone buzzes. Unknown number. She answers. Silence. Then a distorted voice. Cold. Deliberate. Mrs. Reed, stop digging. That baby was never supposed to survive. Static. Call ends. Margaret's face drains of color. What did you just say? Silence. Sophie stares, terrified. Margaret lowers the phone, her heartbeat echoing in the soundscape. The truth I begged for finally came, and with it, a warning I could never forget. Camera pans slowly toward the baby sleeping in Sophie's arms, peaceful, unaware. Margaret's eyes fill with dread. Soft, haunting piano begins to play. I thought the storm had passed, but I was wrong. The real tempest was just beginning.
Interior. Margaret's living room night. Rain slaps against the windows, lightning flashes. The phone call still echoes in Margaret's head. Distorted voice, Mrs. Reed. This isn't over. That baby was never supposed to survive. The line clicks. Silence. Margaret whispers. Never supposed to survive. What are you saying? She stares at the screen. Unknown caller. Her trembling thumb hovers, then hits record call. Too late. Line dead. Margaret, the words looped in my mind, over and over, like thunder that wouldn't stop rolling. Who was behind it? Why would anyone want a child gone, unless that child was proof of something dark? She looks at Liam, asleep in the crib. Every breath of his now sounds like a clock counting down. Fade to black. Low piano note. Flashback montage. 2 years earlier. Soft, distant music. Hazy sunlight. Quick cuts. Laughter. Love. Then secrets. Title card. 2 years earlier. Exterior. City park. Day. Ethan Reed, younger, carefree, throws pebbles into a pond. Lena, radiant yet nervous, watches him. Her hand rests unconsciously on her stomach. Ethan, you've been quiet all morning. What's wrong? Lena smiles faintly. Nothing's wrong, just thinking about the future. Ethan, future? That's new. You always say you hate plans. Lena, maybe I don't have much choice anymore. Ethan notices her tone. He reaches for her hand. Lena, what is it? She hesitates, eyes flicking toward his, then away. I think I might be pregnant. Ethan's breath catches. Shock, then warmth, then fear. Pregnant? Beat. We can make this work. We'll figure it out. No, Ethan, listen, you don't understand. My family, they'd never accept this. You know what my father's like. He'll ruin you. Let him try. Lena tears up. You don't know the kind of money, the kind of reach he has. If he finds out,
He'll make sure this baby never exists. Ethan freezes. The words hit like a blade. What are you saying? Lena, just promise me something. If anything happens, you'll remember this child deserves to live. Cut to Ethan holding her close, unaware these would be their last moments together. Margaret VO. Back then, Ethan was just a boy in love. He thought love could outfight power, but power writes its own rules.
Interior hospital hallway, night. Panic. Doctors rush past. A gurney wheels by. Lena's body is covered in a white sheet. Nurse to another. Car crash. She was 7 months along. They said the baby didn't make it. Another nurse looks down, eyes darting, uneasy. Second nurse. Didn't make it? Or wasn't supposed to? They exchange a look, uneasy, fearful. Margaret VO. That night, a single decision rewrote the story of 2 families. A baby born alive, declared dead, and a system too corrupt to admit it. Interior, private office, same night, flashback. Dimly lit. A man in a white coat, Dr. Grayson, the hospital director, sits with an older, elegant woman, Evelyn Marchand, Sophie's mother. Evelyn. You understand, doctor, this must never be public. The Marchands cannot be tied to a scandal like this. Dr. Grayson. I told you the infant's stable, but what you're asking is unethical. Evelyn leans forward. Unethical or expensive? Pauses, then drops an envelope on the desk. Your hospital could use a new wing, I believe. He stares at the envelope, thick, heavy, a moral war behind his eyes. Dr. Grayson. And the real mother? Evelyn. She's gone. The less said about that, the better. Beat. He nods slowly. Dr. Grayson. And the baby? Evelyn. The child will go to a loving home. My daughter's. Cut to a crying newborn being handed to a nurse. A tag switched. The name on the new tag reads, Baby Sophie Marchand. Margaret VO. That night, 2 destinies were switched with a pen stroke and a payoff. The healthy child meant for one mother was given to another, and no one ever looked back.
Interior, Margaret's house, present day. Margaret sits at the dining table, reports and photos spread before her. Lightning flashes across her face, part detective, part mother. Ethan? She looks up. Ethan stands in the doorway, tired, confused. Ethan, where's Sophie? She left a note, said she needed space. Margaret, softly. Ethan, you should sit down. Ethan, what's going on? Margaret hesitates, hands trembling. The baby, Liam? He's not Sophie's. Ethan stares, not processing. Then anger builds. What kind of joke is that? Margaret, it's not a joke. The DNA test, it proves it. And there's more. Liam's mother was Lena. The silence crushes him. His lips part, but no sound comes out. Lena? That's impossible. Margaret, she gave birth before the accident. The hospital lied. Someone paid to keep it quiet. Ethan grabs the report, eyes darting over the paper like he could change the words by reading faster. Who would do that? Margaret's voice hardens, fury now cold and precise. Sophie's mother, Evelyn Marchand. Ethan looks like he's been punched. His knees buckle. He sits. Her mother. My God. All this time, I married into the same lie that destroyed me. Margaret, Ethan, listen to me. None of this is your fault. You didn't know. Did Sophie? Margaret looks down. The silence is answer enough. She knew, snarls. She knew and said nothing. He stands abruptly, knocking over a chair. Margaret, stop. Softer. She was scared. She loves that baby. Ethan loves him? That's not love, Mom. That's guilt wearing perfume. He storms toward the door.
Margaret, please don't make this worse. We need to be smart now. Whoever called me, they know more than we do. Ethan stops at the door, shoulders tense. Whoever they are, they took Lena from me. I'm not letting them take my son, too. He leaves. The door slams. Margaret stands frozen, helpless.
Interior, Margaret's house, present day. Margaret sits at the dining table, reports and photos spread before her. Lightning flashes across her face, part detective, part mother. Ethan, OS. Mom! She looks up. Ethan stands in the doorway, tired, confused. Ethan, where's Sophie? She left a note, said she needed space. Margaret, softly. Ethan, you should sit down. Ethan, what's going on? She hesitates, hands trembling. Margaret, the baby, Liam. He's not Sophie's. Ethan, stares, not processing. Then anger builds. What kind of joke is that? Interior, Sophie's family estate, night. Camera glides through marble halls. Evelyn Marchant sips wine, watching the rain outside. The butler enters. Butler, madam, the Reeds know. Evelyn, doesn't flinch. Of course they do. It was only a matter of time. Butler, should I? Evelyn, no. Let them drown in their outrage first. By the time they find proof, we'll have buried the rest. Her reflection in the window, cold, powerful. Evelyn VO, the Reeds never understood. Family isn't blood, it's control. She takes another sip of wine. Interior, Ethan's car, night. Heavy rain, windshield wipers thud rhythmically. Ethan drives recklessly, eyes burning with tears. Margaret, VO, when truth arrives too late, it doesn't heal, it destroys. And my son was already halfway to ruin. Cut to, flashback. Ethan and Lena laughing at a beach. Then back to present, his face twisted with rage. Ethan whispers, you promised me, Lena. He said you'd never leave. He slams his hand against the steering wheel, sobbing silently. Phone buzzes. Unknown number. He answers instinctively. Ethan, who is this? Distorted voice. You're digging too deep, Mr. Reed. You think you want the truth, but truth buries people. The line cuts. Ethan screams, the sound swallowed by thunder. Interior, Margaret's bedroom, same time. Margaret sits on the edge of her bed, holding a framed photo. Ethan, Lena, and herself years ago. Margaret, VO. For years I prayed for answers, but sometimes the answers prey on you instead. Her phone rings again, private number. She hesitates, answers. Margaret, who are you? Distorted voice. A friend. Beat. Meet me tomorrow. Memorial Hospital parking lot, 10 a.m. Come alone. Bring the report. Click. Silence. Margaret. Exhales, fear mixed with resolve.
Interior, hospital parking lot, next morning, fog. Margaret stands alone, clutching a folder. A man in a hoodie approaches. Dr. Harper, the one who gave her the report, but now disheveled, eyes darting. Margaret? Dr. Harper, I shouldn't be here. They're watching me. Everything about that baby, it's not just a mix-up, it's a cover-up. Margaret, tell me who they are. The Marchands funded our neonatal wing. They had control over all records. When Lena died, the hospital declared her baby stillborn. But the baby was healthy, transferred under a false name. Margaret and Sophie? Harper? He adjusts his hood. Her parents adopted him through a private clause, off the books. But when Sophie married Ethan, it created a paper trail. That's when someone started cleaning up, deleting files, threatening staff. One nurse vanished last year. Margaret whispers, vanished? He nods gravely. Harper, you have no idea how deep this goes, Mrs. Reed. If they find out you're still asking questions... Gunshot cracks in the distance. Harper collapses mid-sentence. Margaret screams, ducking. Blood stains the fog. A car engine roars and speeds away. Margaret's shaking hands reach for her phone. She calls 911, then looks at the folder, now splattered with blood. Margaret VO. The truth I was chasing just killed a man, and I wasn't sure anymore if I wanted to know the rest. Interior, morgue, later that day. Margaret identifies the body. The attendant covers Harper's face. Her reflection in the glass shows a woman transformed, tired but unbroken. Margaret VO. Lena's death wasn't an accident. The adoption wasn't a mistake. And that phone call, it wasn't a warning. It was a promise. Fade in low piano and heartbeat. She walks out of the morgue, determination burning. Interior, Margaret's house, night. She opens her laptop, tracing names, documents, hospital archives. Every photo of Lena now feels like evidence. Every memory a clue. Overlay montage, her whispering while typing. Margaret, VO. Lena's father, senator's donor. Evelyn Marchand, family foundation investor. Hospital, funded by both. The baby, the perfect secret to protect them all. Her phone buzzes. A message appears. Unknown. Stop digging or lose him next. She looks toward the baby monitor. Liam's soft breathing echoes. Margaret's hand clenches around her phone. Margaret Vio. No. Not this time. No one touches him again. Her voice rises to a whisper, fierce, maternal. Margaret, you wanted the baby gone? You'll have to go through me first. Thunder crashes. Fade out.
Gavel strikes. Crowd murmurs. Rain outside the courthouse. It had been 143 days since the truth tore our world apart, since love, lies, and loss became impossible to separate. Order in the court. Everyone remains seated. Your Honor, whatever happened back then wasn't Sophie's doing. She was a victim too. Mr. Reed, are you suggesting we ignore a falsified adoption, hidden records, and bribery? No, I'm saying she only wanted a family. And that child, he's my son, ours, no matter what the DNA says. Ethan, please stop. I don't deserve this. You deserve a chance to live without ghosts. And just like that, forgiveness replaced fury. The courtroom fell silent, not because justice was served, but because mercy had spoken louder.
Rain grows louder. Outside courthouse. Reporters shout in background. Mrs. Reed, is it true your family paid to hide the baby swap? Sophie, shaking, whispering, please, no more questions. Ethan, we've said everything we needed to. Let us go home. Car door slams. Engine starts. Margaret. The storm outside felt merciful compared to the one inside Ethan's heart. He'd lost trust, lost peace, but not love. The empty nursery. Door creaks open, distant lullaby playing. Ethan, softly, you can still smell him here, his toys, his blanket. Sophie, I used to think if I made everything look perfect, maybe life would stop asking questions. Ethan, and now? Sophie, now I know. Truth doesn't destroy families. Secrets do. Baby laughter echoes faintly, memory-like. Margaret, that night, Sophie didn't sleep. Neither did I. Because forgiveness doesn't erase. It coexists. The letter that never left. Drawer opens, paper rustles. Margaret. While cleaning the study, I found a letter sealed with a trembling hand. Lena's handwriting. The woman who started it all. Ethan, reading aloud. If anything happens to me, tell him the baby survived. He deserves to know. Love doesn't die with truth. Silence, only heartbeat faintly rising. Sophie whispers, she was talking about you, Ethan. Ethan choked. And about him! Margaret, that letter didn't end a story, it rebirthed one. Justice in chains. News broadcast fades in. News anchor. Breaking news. 3 hospital administrators have been arrested for falsifying records in the 2014 baby switch scandal. Authorities confirm that new DNA evidence reopened the case last month. Door closes, TV mutes. Ethan, they'll serve time, but I don't feel victorious. Margaret, because this was never about punishment. It was about peace. Ours by love. Baby giggles, warm afternoon ambience. Ethan holding Liam. Hey, champ, you know what? You changed everything. Sophie, teary smile. Even if you're not ours by birth? Ethan cuts in, firm but gentle. You're ours by love. That's stronger than any bloodline. Soft piano rises. Margaret's voice fades in. Margaret. And as I watched them, I realized love isn't about who we come from.
It's about who stays when truth arrives. Months later, morning breeze, mail slot clicks. Margaret. Months passed, scars turned to silence, until the postman delivered a letter that shattered the calm. Envelope tearing open. Ethan. Reading. DNA results, further anomaly detected. Ethan, Reed, and Liam share identical genetic markers, suggesting identical twins separated at birth. Clock ticking. Piano stops. Silence. Sophie. Whispers. Twins? That's impossible. Ethan stares ahead. Or maybe it's just the beginning. Baby laughter echoes. Margaret's voice fades in one last time. Margaret. Blood may tell the story, but love decides how it ends. And sometimes, the end is only a pause before another truth begins. Music swells. Slow piano, heartbeat sinks, fade out.
Every truth comes at a cost, but some lies are born to protect love.